If I could go back and give my 40-year-old self one piece of advice, it would be this. Stop waiting for your life to happen and start designing it. The biggest mistake I made in my 40s was believing I was too busy building a life to actually live it. I thought the grind was just a phase, but that phase cost me. It cost me my health, my peace of mind, and it almost cost me my relationships. I was so focused on the finish line that I forgot to enjoy the run, and I ended up crashing instead. In this video, I want to walk you through my journey, the burnout, the wake-up call, and the 3 key things I changed that completely turned my life around. Stick around, because I don't want you to make the same mistakes I did. From the outside, my life in my early 40s looked like everything I was supposed to want. I had the title, the corner office, the salary that finally meant we weren't just comfortable, we were secure. I could point to my family, my house, my car, all the trophies of a life spent climbing the ladder. But on the inside, I was running on a treadmill that never stopped, and I was the only one who couldn't see that I was getting nowhere, just increasingly exhausted. Every day was a blur of back-to-back meetings, deadlines that felt like life or death situations, and a relentless chase for the next hit of external validation. A promotion would feel good for about a week, and then the anxiety would set in again, the quiet fear that I now had to prove I deserved it, that I had to work even harder to keep it. The goalposts kept moving, and I was the one constantly moving them, thinking the next milestone would finally be the one that made me feel like I had arrived. The cruelest irony of it all was that I was sacrificing the very people I thought I was doing it for. My idea of being a good provider was warped. I believed providing meant more things, a bigger college fund, a safer neighborhood. But what I was actually providing was my absence. I'd come home late, my mind still buzzing with the problems of the office, too mentally drained to truly be present. I'd sit at the dinner table, but I wasn't really there. I was already composing an email in my head. My kids would ask me to play and I'd say, "In a minute, buddy." A minute that never came. My partner would try to connect with me about their day, and I'd listen with one ear, my phone lighting up with notifications on the table between us, a constant reminder that my real attention was elsewhere. I was so busy building a future for us that I was missing our present. And my own well-being? That was the first thing to be negotiable, the easiest sacrifice to make on the altar of productivity. That gym membership I bought every January with such optimism became a monthly guilt trip, a line item on my bank statement mocking me. My diet consisted of whatever was fastest, takeout eaten at my desk so I could keep working, or giant cups of coffee that were less about enjoyment and more about fuel. Sleep was a nuisance, something I tried to negotiate with, telling myself I could catch up on the weekend. I was treating my body like a machine, ignoring every warning light that flickered, the constant low-grade anxiety, the shortness of temper, the feeling of being constantly overwhelmed. I had convinced myself that this was just the price of admission for a successful life. I'd tell myself, "This is what your 40s are for. This is responsibility. This is what a man does." I buried the quiet voice that whispered this wasn't living under a mountain of obligations and to-do lists. The biggest lie I ever told myself was that there would be a later. I kept pushing my own happiness and health into some vague, distant future, a time when the work would be done and I could finally relax. I didn't realize I was building a life I was too tired to live. And then, my body and mind finally forced me to listen. It's funny, we always expect the wake-up call to be one dramatic, life-altering event, a heart attack, a collapse. But for me, it wasn't a single explosion. It was a slow, quiet unraveling. It was a series of small cracks that finally broke the dam. The constant low-grade headache that never quite went away. The irrational irritability over the smallest things, like a misplaced coffee mug that would send me into a silent rage. The feeling of being constantly on the edge of tears for no reason I could articulate. I was a cup that had been filled one drop too many, and I was spilling over everything and everyone. I remember one specific Tuesday night with a clarity that still haunts me. The office was empty and silent, that hollow silence of a place after everyone has gone home to their lives. It was 9 p.m., and I was staring at a spreadsheet, the numbers blurring into a meaningless gray haze. My third late night that week. And I just broke. I didn't sob. It was quieter, more terrifying than that. Tears just started streaming down my face, and I couldn't make them stop. I was so profoundly exhausted that my bones ached, but I knew the second I got into bed, my mind would snap into a frantic, anxious alertness, replaying every unfinished task and potential mistake. I looked around at my empty office, the framed pictures of my family on the desk, and I felt a loneliness so deep, it was like a physical pain. I was surrounded by evidence of a full life, a family, colleagues, success, and yet I had never felt more completely and utterly alone. I was a ghost in my own life. The final straw was a routine doctor's appointment I'd been putting off for months. I went in for a refill on a prescription, and she took my blood pressure. Her cheerful demeanor faded. She took it again. And then she looked at me, not as a chart, but as a person, and her voice was full of a genuine, professional concern that cut through all my denial. She told me my blood pressure wasn't just high, it was at a dangerous level. She talked about stress, about sustainability, about the very real, physical cost of the path I was on. She wasn't scolding me. She was worried. And in that sterile, bright room, surrounded by posters about health and wellness, the last of my excuses crumbled. This wasn't just in my head anymore. My body was literally shutting down under the weight of a life I was never meant to carry. That was the moment the illusion shattered completely. Sitting in that doctor's office, the paper crinkling beneath me, I had the sudden, chilling realization I wasn't living, I was merely enduring. I was on autopilot, white-knuckling my way through each day, just trying to survive until the weekend, until the next vacation, until some distant retirement that was no guarantee. I saw with horrifying clarity that I was killing myself to build a legacy for a future I might not even live to see. What good was the perfect retirement plan if I was too broken and burnt out to enjoy it? What value was there in a college fund for my kids if they only remembered a father who was too stressed and tired to truly know them? The trade-off wasn't just lopsided. It was a catastrophic failure of priorities. I had confused motion for purpose, and busyness for meaning. And in that moment, I knew, with a certainty I hadn't felt in years, that I had to make a change. There was no other choice. The path I was on had an end, and it was rapidly approaching. Turning it all around wasn't like flipping a switch. There was no instant fix, no magic bullet. After the crash comes the slow, often frustrating work of rebuilding. And for me, that rebuilding started with 3 fundamental shifts in how I saw everything. It was about changing the very operating system my life ran on. The first and most crucial shift was making my health an absolute priority, but not for the reasons you might think. This wasn't about getting six-pack abs or running a marathon. It was about functionality. It was the simple, stark realization that I couldn't be a good father, partner, or even a competent professional if I was running on empty. So, I started small. I decided that 30 minutes of walking outside was more important than sending 30 more emails. It felt irresponsible at first, like I was playing hooky from my own life. But that daily walk, rain or shine, became my non-negotiable anchor. It was time where I wasn't consumed by output. I started meal prepping on Sundays. Not elaborate diets, just simple, real food so that when I was tired during the week, a healthy choice was the easiest choice. And perhaps the most powerful thing I did was start talking to a therapist. I had to unpack all those ingrained beliefs that my worth was tied to my productivity. I had to learn that resting isn't lazy, that setting a boundary isn't selfish. It was about finally understanding that you cannot pour from an empty cup. You have to fill your own first. The second shift was a complete change in how I defined a life well lived. I stopped asking myself, "How can I get ahead?" and started asking, "What makes me feel truly alive?" I had to dig through the rubble of my old interests to remember what that even felt like. I found my old guitar, dusty in the closet, and promised myself I'd learn just one song, just for the joy of it. The calluses on my fingers felt like a badge of honor, a sign I was creating something instead of just consuming problems. I started volunteering at a local community garden, getting my hands dirty in the soil. There was something profoundly healing about working on a timescale dictated by seasons and growth, not quarterly reports. I became fiercely protective of my energy, focusing on the depth of my relationships rather than the size of my network. A quiet dinner with a close friend where we actually talked about our lives became more valuable than a dozen superficial networking events. I had to define success on my own terms, and for me, that became about connection and contentment, not just climbing. The third and final shift was the most practical, and in many ways, the most profound. I declared war on the word someday. I realized someday is a thief. It's a comfortable lie we tell ourselves to postpone our joy, and it often means never. So, I stopped deferring my life. That trip to the mountains I always talked about. I looked at my calendar, found a weekend, and booked it. It wasn't the grand, month-long expedition I'd fantasized about, but it was real. That difficult conversation I needed to have with my dad to clear the air? I stopped waiting for the right moment, and made the moment right by picking up the phone. It was terrifying, but the liberation on the other side was worth it. Now, I am ruthless with my calendar, but not just with work meetings. I block time for a coffee with my wife, for my son's baseball game, for an hour of reading a novel. And I protect those appointments with the same ferocity I once reserved for a board meeting, because I finally understand that those moments aren't the interruptions in my life. They are the point of it. So where does that leave me now? I want to be perfectly honest with you. I'm not perfect. I still have stressful days. The old habits, that ingrained need to hustle, they sometimes whisper in my ear. But the difference is night and day. The biggest change isn't in my schedule. It's in me. I'm present. When I'm having dinner with my family, I'm actually there. Not just physically, but mentally. I'm listening to the stories about my kids' school day, and I'm not composing an email in my head. I can actually feel the warmth of the coffee cup in my hand instead of just gulping it down as fuel. I have energy that isn't fueled by caffeine and anxiety, but by real rest and a sense of purpose. My relationships are deeper and more authentic because I'm showing up as a whole person, not just a drained shell of one. The most beautiful irony is that I'm finally enjoying the life I worked so hard to build. I can sit on my porch and just feel content. I don't need to be achieving something every second to feel worthy. I've discovered a quiet confidence that comes from knowing my value isn't tied to my output, but to my character and my connections. And this is my message to you. You do not need to hit a wall like I did. You don't need a doctor's warning or a breakdown in your office to give yourself permission to change course. That feeling in your gut, that quiet voice of exhaustion or discontent you're probably trying to outrun, that's your wake-up call right now. It's not too late. Please, just take a quiet moment and look at your life with clear eyes. What is it that you're neglecting? Is it your health, your curiosity, your joy? What are you constantly deferring to a mythical someday that may never come? That hobby, that trip, that difficult but necessary conversation? Your future self is watching you right now, begging you to pay attention. They are praying that you will be brave enough to make one small change today. Not a grand overhaul, but one single, tiny step toward a life that feels more like living and less like enduring. You built this life, which means you have the power to redesign it. It doesn't require a revolution. It just requires a decision to stop waiting and start living on your own terms right now. So I'll leave you with this one question, and I'd genuinely love to know your answer. What is one small thing, and I mean truly small, that you can do this week to invest in your future self? Maybe it's finally scheduling the doctor's appointment you've been putting off. Maybe it's turning off your phone for one uninterrupted hour to be completely present with your kids or your partner. Maybe it's just taking 10 minutes to sit quietly with a cup of coffee and remember what you used to love to do before life got so busy. Whatever it is, I want to hear about it. Share that one commitment with me in the comments below. Telling someone makes it real, and I read every single comment because this is a conversation, not just a broadcast. If any part of my story today resonated with you, if it felt familiar or struck a chord, please let me know by giving this video a thumbs up. It might seem like a small gesture, but it truly helps spread this message to others who might need to hear it. And if you're looking for more of these honest conversations about navigating midlife, about designing a life filled with purpose and presence instead of pressure, then please consider subscribing. I'm not an expert with all the answers. I'm just a guy, right here in the trenches with you, trying to figure it out and sharing what I've learned the hard way. Remember this above all else. Your 40s, your 50s, and every chapter after that are not a deadline. They are not the beginning of the end. They are a launch pad. You have more wisdom, more agency, and more power than you may feel right now. You get to decide what comes next. Don't wait for a crisis to give you permission to live well. Don't make the same mistake I did. Your life is happening right now. Start designing it today.